They have 5 legitimate first-round picks. Arvell Reese has emerged as a possible top 5 pick in the NFL. You just go on and on. Sonny Styles, Dante Moore looked like the best quarterback of the weekend. But was it just because they played James Madison? Mendoza's got tools, he's got talent, he's got weapons. He's going to win this game. The Bulldogs rank 9th in the country. They're only allowing 15.9 points per game. The Rebels are 22nd in the country, 19.3 points per game.
Welcome to the show. Today we're talking about round 2 of the college football playoff, and the first game we start off with is the Cotton Bowl with Miami against Ohio State. Ohio State comes into the game as 8.5-point favorites. This is a primetime game and a standalone game on Wednesday night, New Year's Eve, at 7:30 on ESPN. Ohio State comes into the game at minus 8.5 favorite. What do you see in this game?
Well, right out of the gate, Nick, we start off with, I think, the most compelling game of the weekend. Ohio State coming off a loss to Indiana in the Big Ten championship, and Miami coming off a spectacular win, in my opinion, against Texas A&M last week in College Station. So first, let's look at Ohio State and their defense. And, in the past, we've talked about Ohio State's offense. Every year they come in with a high-powered offense. Their defense has not been nearly as good as it is this year. You go right across the D. They have 5 legitimate first-round picks. They're starting with Caleb Downs, who will be the best player on the field when Ohio State is on defense. Davison Igbinosun has improved immensely this year and is getting close to being a lockdown corner in college football. Arvell Reese has emerged as a possible top 5 pick in the NFL. You just go on and on. Sonny Styles. And then the surprise of the season for me, Caden Curry. Caden Curry can either come off the edge or, in Matt Patricia's defense, which is all about scheme and all about confusion, drop back into coverage. And I think that is where this game is going to be won, in Matt Patricia being able to confuse Miami's offense and use the athletes that he has, and boy, does he have athletes, in order to eventually just overwhelm and wear Miami down.
Yeah, and to highlight this Ohio State defense, the defense is the top defense in the country. They're first in the country in points allowed per game with just over a touchdown with 8, yards allowed per game with 213 per game, and passing yards allowed per game. The defense is led by 3-time Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator Matt Patricia. And they play a pro scheme at the college level. They disguise a lot of their coverages, and they force quarterbacks into mistakes. They also have Caleb Downs, like you mentioned, the winner of the Jim Thorpe Award, which is awarded to the best defensive back in the country. They also have 3 first-team All-American players on this defense, and they've only allowed 10 touchdowns all season. But then you flip the page to the offense. They have 2 first-team All-Big Ten wide receivers in Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. They have the best wide receiver room in the country by depth as well. And then you go to the quarterback. They have Heisman candidate Julian Sayin at quarterback, who set the record for best completion percentage in a season this year and is second in the country in passing touchdowns. The offensive line is elite. Although they didn't perform in that Big Ten championship, they still only allowed 11 sacks on the year. The way that I see it is Ohio State has the better talent, more firepower, and a better defense. They win by minimizing that Miami run game with Mark Fletcher Jr. and force Carson Beck to throw. Finding ways to get the ball to Jeremiah Smith is also going to lead them to a victory here. What do you see here?
Well, listen, I do agree that Ohio State has the better talent, but it's not as dramatic as it's been in other games that they played this season. But whenever Ohio State is on the field, I already said that Caleb Downs is the best player when they're on defense. When they're on offense, the best player on the field is on the Ohio State side of the ball again with Jeremiah Smith. Well, that team is just loaded. This is going to come down, in my opinion, to Can Ohio State's offensive line withstand the rush from Miami's defensive line? Miami's defense was an absolute beast against Texas A&M. Ruben Bain had a wonderful game, and I think that he could cause havoc with Ohio State's offensive line. They did not play well against Indiana. Indiana's defensive line had a number of tackles for losses. But when I mix it all up, Nick, I have to come down to I'm taking Ohio State to win this game, but I am not willing to lay the 8.5 points. And so if I were betting, I would take Miami. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I see Ohio State covering the spread here of 8.5. I think that their talent is too much for this Miami team. It's going to come down to if Ohio State's offensive line can stop that pass rush from Miami. I think they get the job done in this game. Moving on to the next game, we have the Orange Bowl. Oregon plays Texas Tech at noon on New Year's Day. Oregon comes in as a slight favorite, slight 1.5 point favorite. How do you see this game playing out?
I think the story of this game is can Oregon's offense continue to roll against Texas Tech like they did in round one? Oregon looked fantastic in round one, and Dante Moore looked like the best quarterback of the weekend. But was it just because they played James Madison? After all, Moore did throw two interceptions in that game, and they were not against the staunchest defensive backfield. Uh, they face off against Texas Tech, who boasts the Defensive Player of the Year and Jacob Rodriguez, who won the Bednarik Award. And their defense is ranked number 2 in points per game, 3 in total yards allowed per game, and number 1 against the rush. Same question here, though. Is Texas Tech's defense for real, or did they just benefit from a weaker schedule than the other teams that are currently in the playoffs? I think they're for real, Nick. What do you think?
Yeah, and this Texas Tech defense is going to have the opportunity to show that they're an elite defense. A lot of people were saying that they have questioned whether their defense is elite due to the fact that they play a Big 12 schedule. The defense is an elite defense, though. They have the number 1 ranked rushing defense in the country. They have the most turnovers in college football this year, and they're third in points allowed with only 10. They have 31 turnovers this year. Their leader, Jacob Rodriguez, is a Bednarik Award winner and a Butkus Award winner. He has 4 interceptions and 7 forced fumbles. That's most in the country, with 11 turnovers this year. He makes big plays for this defense. They also have David Bailey, who has 13.5 sacks on the year and is second in the country in sacks. The defense is tied for 4th in the country for most sacks. They get a chance to prove if they're an elite defense. I think they get it done. The defense will have a tough matchup against Dante Moore, but how do you see this matchup going down on Thursday?
Well, when I look at Texas Tech's offense, I'm very impressed in their ability to run the ball. Cameron Dickey has almost 1,000 yards, and Jacoby Williams ran for over 600 yards. And both of those combined have 18 rushing touchdowns. This is a run first offense, which again is outside of the norm from what we've seen with Big 12 champions in the past. Will Texas Tech be able to run the ball the way they have this season against Oregon, who themselves are a top 8 defense? Nick, I'm going with Texas Tech. I'm obviously taking the points, and I think Texas Tech is going to prove that they are legit, and it's going to be lights out for Oregon after this one.
Yeah, this Texas Tech run offense is elite, with Cameron Dickey, like you mentioned, leading the Big 12 in touchdowns this year on the ground. They averaged as a team 194 rushing yards per game. They control clock and wear down defenses. They average just around 300 yards per game in the passing department. Quarterback Baron Morton has only thrown 4 interceptions all year, which is lowest among all quarterbacks this year. The offensive line is one of the most experienced in the country, and Pro Football Focus ranks their offensive line as the 11th best passing offensive line in the country. This offensive line creates holes. The way that I see this game going is Texas Tech's defense will need to be elite in this game. They need to force Oregon to play a physical game like they're used to, and they need to control the game and limit the amount of time Oregon's offense has to operate. And they need to limit those big, explosive Oregon plays in this game. But so then moving on to the next game of New Year's Day is the Rose Bowl. Alabama is playing Indiana, and Indiana comes in as a 6.5-point favorite. This game is also on ESPN at 4 p.m. on New Year's Day. Indiana, man, Kirk Cignetti has turned Indiana from a Big Ten bottom feeder into a legit contender this year. How do you see this game going?
All right, so I'm going to look at this almost like a mathematical equation, Nick, a series of if-then statements. So starting with last week, Alabama did not run the ball well against Oklahoma. In the Big Ten championship game, Ohio State did not run the ball well against Indiana, and Indiana turned them into a one-dimensional offense, and they were able to hold them to 10 points. Therefore, if Alabama does not run the ball well against Indiana and Alabama becomes one-dimensional, Indiana will win this game. And I am going to predict that Indiana is going to win this game. Meanwhile, Indiana did kind of run the ball well against Ohio State. If you take the sack yards that Mendoza had out of the equation, they ran for around 120 yards. Not bad, especially against Ohio State's defense. I think Indiana will run well enough to pull out a win against Alabama. Fernando Mendoza does not have to be spectacular in this game. He just needs to be clean in this game. He's got the firepower. He's got good running backs. Indiana has two solid running backs in Roland Hembry and Kalen Black. They have good receivers in Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper Jr. Mendoza's got tools. He's got talent. He's got weapons. He's going to win this game. I think it's going to be another relatively low scoring game. I'm going to pick Indiana to win, but I am not going to lay the points. I expect Alabama to cover the spread.
Yeah, and even talking about this Indiana defense, one of the best defenses in the country. They're the number 3 rushing defense in the country. They're second in the country in points allowed per game with just under 11, and they're fourth in the country in sacks. They have 5 players with more than 5 sacks on that defensive line. And hey, throwing it to the secondary, defensive back Lewis Moore is second in the country in interceptions with 6. And they have 25 turnovers this year, 17 interceptions by this defense. Indiana has an elite run defense, averaged only 77 rushing yards allowed per game, and number 3 run defense in the country. They held Ohio State to 10 points in that game and won a defensive battle against the Ohio State Buckeyes. How do you see their defense playing?
Indiana's defense played lights out against Ohio State. Ohio State has had a problem running the ball all season, and it really showed in that game. They ran the ball abysmally, and that's what I think is going to happen here. Do not think that Alabama is going to run the ball well against the defense, and so consequently, they're going to turn this game into a one-dimensional game. Ty Simpson played a really clean game last time. I don't think he's going to be able to keep it clean if they can't run the ball. There's just going to be too much pressure from the Indiana defensive line, and somewhere along the line, there's going to be a mistake made. As much as I really think Ty Simpson is a mature, very good college quarterback, I think Indiana could expose a little bit of one-dimensionalness that Alabama has and put them into some maybe third and longs where they have to take shots that they normally wouldn't take, and Indiana's going to win it. But I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I just like Indiana in this game, and I think that the defense will win it.
Yeah, and even to talk about their offense, Fernando Mendoza, the leader of that offense, Heisman winner this year, leads the country in passing touchdowns with 33. And on the outside, he has elite wide receivers in Elijah Surratt with 12 touchdowns. That's the most in the Big Ten. And then Omar Cooper Jr. with 11 touchdowns, which is right behind Elijah Surratt. Their run game is one of the best in the country. They average 5.5 yards per carry on the year. They average 221 rushing yards per game. That's most in the Big Ten and 10th in the country. They're ranked 4th in the country in points per game with 42 points. The way that I see this game playing out is Indiana's defense will need to play like they did in that Ohio State game, and Indiana wins by getting a run game going early to open up their pass, pressure Ty Simpson into turning the ball over, and controlling the clock with their offense. They need to win the line of scrimmage here to win this game. Then moving on to the Sugar Bowl, Ole Miss against Georgia, as Georgia comes in as a 6.5-point favorite. This game is the night game on New Year's Day. This is a Week 8 rematch where these teams already played, where Georgia beat Ole Miss 43-35. How do you see this rematch playing out?
So in that first game, Mississippi was really having their way until Georgia ripped off like 17 points in the final period and squeaked one out. But so you look at that, they scored 78 points combined. These two defenses have improved a lot since that first game. I do not expect there to be 78 points scored in this game. I know that the folks that have put the lines out there have set the over under, I believe, around 56 here. I'm not sure they're going to go over that, but I think these defenses have seriously improved. The Bulldogs rank ninth in the country. They're only allowing 15.9 points per game, but the Rebels are 22nd in the country, 19.3 points per game. So something happened in that first game where those defenses, neither one played up to their capability. And I don't think that's going to happen again this time.
Yeah, and let's talk about that Georgia defense. This is one of the main reasons why they're in this college football playoff this year. They have an elite run defense in an elite conference. They only allow around 100 yards per game on the ground, and they force teams into passing situations. A top secondary in the country, along with the SEC, they're top 10 in points allowed per game with 16, and they make big plays when it matters. They've won plenty of close games this year, and they have one of the best defenses in the country when it comes to close game situations. And then you turn the page to the offense. They've proved that they can win in close games this year, and Gunnar Stockton has one of the best touchdown to interception ratios. 23 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Stockton has the highest fourth quarter completion percentage, and this offense is good because they can take care of the ball and play clean. The offense shows up in big games. One of the top offensive lines in the country for this Georgia team, and the run game is good for Georgia. Running back Nate Frazier and Gunnar Stockton have combined for 14 rushing touchdowns this year.
Yeah, Nick. And, when you look at how these teams are going to match up here, now you've got the Mississippi DC, Pete Golding, as the head coach. So they've maintained continuity on the defense, although Golding now has a broader responsibility. And offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss has come back in the interim to continue to lead the offense. So there is continuity on the Ole Miss side. However, they came out really emotionally last week. They were at home. They had the weight of the world lifted off of them with the decision being behind them. And they really, I think, spent a lot of emotional energy. It's going to be really hard for them to maintain that level of emotion and use it in a positive way against Georgia. Georgia also has way more talent, as we could see, than Tulane had. And so when you look at how these teams match up, you've got to give the edge to Georgia. Georgia really played well in the SEC championship game. And on both sides of the ball, I thought had their will with Alabama. So, Nick, I'm picking Georgia in this game. I do think they cover the 6.5-point spread. I think Mississippi had an awesome season, and it's unfortunate that it's going to end this way, but I do think it ends. They stop the train. So give me Georgia in this game. I'm going to give the 6.5 points, and I can't wait to see how they match up against Ohio State in the next round.
Yeah, you can make the case that Ole Miss actually has the better offense in this game. But I think this game, it's going to show that there's no Lane Kiffin on that sideline. And I think Georgia's going to get it done by controlling the line of scrimmage, establishing their run game, stopping those explosive plays from Ole Miss, and containing Kawan Lacey, who isn't fully 100%.
That's right, Nick. He came out of that game against Tulane twice. He looked like he was in a lot of pain with that shoulder. There hasn't been a lot of information coming out of the Ole Miss camp since then. They say he's going to be ready. I really doubt that he's going to be able to take the wear and tear that he's going to experience from that Georgia defense, and that's going to be a key factor in this game. I think Lacey's injury is going to play a key factor in this game, and I don't think Trinidad Chambliss has enough tools if he doesn't have a healthy Lacey.
Yeah, the run game is going to play a big role for both teams in this game. So college football playoff starts Wednesday night, New Year's Eve at 7:30, Miami against Ohio State. And we'll be back soon to break down this round of games shortly.